Why Trump decided not to hand Ukraine its secret weapon. The meeting between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House was supposed to change everything. On the table was one of America's most powerful and precise weapons, the Tomahawk land attack missile. With a range of 2,500 kilometers, these long-range cruise missiles could strike deep into enemy territory. Moscow itself would be within reach.
They're an amazing weapon. They're a very powerful weapon, but they're a very dangerous weapon. And it could mean big, escalation. It could mean a lot of bad things can happen. Tomahawks are a big deal.
For Ukraine, that would have meant a dramatic expansion in its ability to retaliate against Russia. But after hours of talks and weeks of speculation, Trump made a surprising move. He decided not to give them. So, why did Trump back down? Let's break it down. First, let's understand what's at stake. The Tomahawk is not your average missile. It's a symbol of American power, used in precise strikes across Iraq, Syria, and Libya. These missiles can be launched from ships or submarines, fly at low altitudes, and hit targets more than 1,500 meters away. As the article explains, with a range of 2,500 kilometers, or 1,500 miles, 1,945 Russian military assets and the city of Moscow would have been in the range of the weapon. That's massive. In essence, it would have given Ukraine a tool capable of reaching deep into the Russian heartland. It would have changed the dynamic of the war entirely, not just of a defensive fight, but the ability to strike back with long-range precision. Trump himself had hinted earlier that he was open to the idea. On Air Force One, he told reporters, I might say, look, if this war is not going to get settled, I'm going to send them Tomahawks. The idea was to pressure both sides, especially Russia, into finding a diplomatic solution. But days later, the tone changed. After his meeting with Zelensky, Trump stepped back, saying he hoped to end the war without Tomahawks. The big question now was, what changed his mind?
One of the reasons we want to get this war over is exactly that. It's not easy for us to give. You're talking about massive numbers of very powerful weapons. So that's one of the things we'll be talking about. Hopefully they won't need it. Hopefully we'll be able to get the war over with without thinking about Tomahawks.
The first reason is the most obvious. Russia has warned repeatedly that the delivery of long-range missiles like the Tomahawk would cross a red line. Dmitry Medvedev, the former Russian president and current deputy chair of Russia's Security Council, made that threat explicit. Medvedev warned that it was impossible to distinguish between Tomahawk missiles carrying nuclear warheads and conventional ones after they are launched, and hinted that Russia's response to a Tomahawk attack may be nuclear. His chilling follow-up? How should Russia respond? Exactly. In other words, they wouldn't wait to find out. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov echoed this warning, saying, the topic of Tomahawks is of extreme concern, and that any sale would mark a very dramatic moment, with tensions escalating from all sides. He added, just imagine, a long-range missile is launched and is flying, and we know that it could be nuclear. What should the Russian Federation think? It's hard to tell how serious these threats are. Russia has made nuclear threats before, but this time it struck a nerve. Zelensky himself hinted that escalation risk was the deciding factor in not going forward with the deal. He told reporters that both he and Trump had agreed not to make public statements about long-range missiles because the United States does not want an escalation. And when asked whether he was optimistic that Ukraine would get the Tomahawks, his answer was simple: I am realistic. That realism is rooted in one fact. Supplying Tomahawks could have brought the US and Russia dangerously close to direct confrontation. The stakes could not be higher. The two nations standing at the apex of the nuclear world, United States and Russia, together possess the vast majority of the world's nuclear arsenal. According to the Federation of American Scientists, 9 countries possess roughly 12,241 warheads as of the beginning of 2025. Combined, the United States and Russia now possess approximately 87% of the world's total inventory of nuclear weapons and 83% of the stockpiled warheads available for use by the military. To put it in perspective, experts say just a few hundred nuclear warheads could cause a nuclear winter, wiping out major cities, collapsing the climate and food systems, and ending civilization as we know it. Yet, these two nations have thousands of warheads between them. In an interview with Tucker Carlson 2 years ago, Trump laid the risk of nuclear war.
But we have a bigger problem. The bigger problem is the weaponry. The weaponry today is so powerful. This isn't like Second World War where we have army tanks running around shooting each other. This is weapons the likes of which the world has never seen before. They have them and we have them. And China has them less, but within 5 years, China will have equal to us. China, I'm talking about nuclear.
This isn't rhetorical flourish. It signals how cautious Trump is about nuclear escalation. He sees the handing over of a long-range strike weapon, such as the missile discussed earlier, not simply as a military decision, but as a potential threshold for nuclear confrontation. By choosing not to hand Ukraine the long-range weapon in question, Trump appears to weigh not just the immediate battlefield effects, but also the largest existential risk that a conventional weapon exchange could cascade into nuclear use, especially given how close to parity the US and Russia already are. In his mind, this calculus of avoiding that single madman flicking the switch dominates more than any other factor. Another major concern inside the White House was the fear that giving Ukraine Tomahawks would effectively drag the US into the war. According to the Kremlin, Vladimir Putin directly told Trump that selling Tomahawks to Ukraine would inflict significant damage on US-Russia relations and also derail peace talks. Now, that's a warning Trump couldn't ignore. Putin also claimed that it's not possible to use Tomahawks without the direct participation of US military personnel, suggesting that their deployment would mark a qualitatively new stage of escalation. That statement alone might have been enough to make Trump hesitate. The optics of American troops or technicians operating weapons systems in Ukraine would be a political disaster and a potential pretext for Russian retaliation. Whether or not he saw this as a serious risk to US security, Trump will be aware that greater US involvement most likely wouldn't appeal to his voter base. That's an important point. Trump's political strategy has always been clear: America first. He won the presidency by promising to keep the US out of forever wars, cut international aid, and focus on domestic priorities. His voter base is tired of foreign entanglements, and any move that risks deeper US involvement in Ukraine could alienate them. Tony Brenton, the former British ambassador to Russia, summed it up perfectly. Trump had made it clear that he believes Ukraine is not really America's war. It's Europe's war. Brenton added that while Trump is willing to be supportive up to a point, Europe should be carrying the major burden of arming Ukraine and giving financial help to Ukraine. That perspective aligns perfectly with Trump's long-held isolationist stance. For him, the Ukraine war is not a moral crusade. It's a geopolitical headache best handled by Europe. By refusing to hand over the Tomahawks, Trump is essentially saying, this isn't our fight. And politically, that message plays well. Another factor behind Trump's decision is far more practical: supply. Even if Trump wanted to give Ukraine Tomahawks, the US simply doesn't have an abundance to spare. The article notes that Ukraine would require a relatively new land-launched variant of the Tomahawk missile because it does not have the ships or the submarines the missiles are usually launched from. That version is in short supply. The US Army reportedly only has 2 land-based launchers capable of firing them. Trump addressed this concern directly, saying, "We need them too, so I don't know what we can do about that." He added that the US could not deplete its own arsenal. Now, this is not the first time this issue has come up. Western countries have been struggling with dwindling stockpiles after years of supplying weapons to Ukraine. From artillery shells to Patriot systems, replenishing inventories takes time and money. Giving away one of America's most advanced systems could leave the US vulnerable in other theaters, especially in Asia, where tensions with China remain high. So, even from a purely logistical standpoint, the decision not to send Tomahawks makes sense. It's also possible that Trump's decision was as much about strategy as it was about restraint. By floating the idea of sending the Tomahawks, Trump may have been testing Moscow's reaction, seeing how far he could push without committing. His earlier comment about sending them Tomahawks could have been a calculated bluff, designed to pressure both sides into negotiating. After all, Trump is known for using unpredictability as a diplomatic tool. Throughout his first presidency, he frequently leveraged threats, from tariffs to missile strikes, to extract concessions. This could well be another example of that same playbook. By backing down, Trump positions himself as the rational peacemaker rather than the warmonger. He can claim he's willing to use force, but only as a last resort. And politically, that's a win-win. He maintains leverage over Russia while reassuring his base that he's not dragging America into another conflict. For Zelensky, the outcome was disappointing but not entirely surprising. The Ukrainian leader knows the limits of Western support. Despite billions in aid, key allies remain cautious about giving Ukraine weapons that could strike inside Russia. His tone after the meeting reflected that understanding. When asked about the Tomahawks, he replied, "I am realistic." In other words, he's not giving up, but he's also not expecting miracles. It also sends a broader signal to Kyiv. America's support has limits. Trump is willing to provide financial and defensive aid, but not offensive weapons that risk a direct US-Russia clash. That might reshape Ukraine's strategy going forward, focusing more on building European support, developing indigenous weapons programs, and continuing to push for diplomatic solutions. Trump's decision not to send Tomahawks isn't just about missiles, it's about balance. He's balancing deterrence with diplomacy, strength with caution, and domestic politics with global pressure. Each move has consequences. If he sends the missiles, he risks escalation and a backlash at home. If he holds back, critics accuse him of appeasing Russia. But, in Trump's view, avoiding a wider war is the priority. As he reportedly said after his meeting with Zelensky, he hopes to end the war without Tomahawks. Now that line encapsulates his entire foreign policy doctrine: peace through restraint, not escalation. The immediate consequence of this decision is that Ukraine remains without the long-range strike capability it desperately wants. But that doesn't mean the US is stepping away completely. Washington continues to provide intelligence, defensive systems, and financial support. However, the decision marks a shift, one that reflects growing fatigue in Western capitals. The war has dragged on for nearly 3 years, and public support for unlimited aid is waning. For Trump, who's already thinking about re-election, the optics matter. He can claim he's keeping America safe, avoiding nuclear war, and still supporting Ukraine, just not with the kind of weapons that could tip the balance too far. Meanwhile, for Russia, this is a small but significant victory. Avoiding Tomahawks in Ukrainian hands removes a direct threat to Moscow. But it also underscores how much influence nuclear deterrence still holds in modern geopolitics. When Trump walked out of the White House meeting with Zelensky, his decision not to hand Ukraine its secret weapon may have disappointed Kyiv, but it wasn't irrational. The potential benefits, deterring Russia, were outweighed by the risks: nuclear escalation, political backlash, and depletion of America's own defenses. The Tomahawk story isn't just about one missile. It's about how far world leaders are willing to go in the shadow of nuclear deterrence, and how much risk they're willing to take to protect allies. As Zelensky said, "I am realistic," and perhaps, in his own way, Trump is too. In a world where one wrong move could ignite a global conflict, restraint might be the most powerful weapon of all.